It seems we fight together again.
Oh, I'm getting play of the game this time.
I'm getting play of the toy.
10 seconds remain. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go forth and scourge this realm of life.
Sí.
This is your doing, I assume.
I am here.
Thank you, healer.
You think yourself worthy to wield the Dragon Knight's power? Prove it. Take control of the shrines.
Un poco más y te vas a Midward, pues. ¿Ah? No. Solo. Lo estoy streameando. Tengo que hablar. Acá.
Capture the shrines. Inherit the Dragon Knight
Acá, pues.
and lay waste to this forsaken kingdom.
Choose a talent. The dark flame awaits them. My wounds are mending.
Get back.
Podría.
Choose a talent.
Te creo. Más las copias me hace sacar algo rápido. Pegar.
Continue to serve me, disciple.
Oh, care verga.
Choose a talent.
Hijo de pu- Este.
I tried to save this realm.
¿Quién?
Now it burns. I've been healed. Good. My charter. Decent. Unsophisticated, but decent. That beast is not my beloved.
This is your doing, I assume.
You lost the beat. I need some help here. Good shot.
I am restored.
Wounds are in pieces. This is your doing.
We're on top of the world, baby.
Top of the world, baby. Vale.
We must retreat.
Thank you.
Life essence. This is your doing, I assume. The master will be pleased.
Pero hijo de puta, pues.
Power gathers within the shrines. Seize them and become the new Dragon Knight.
A tu madre.
I've been healed. Good. My husband is
No, 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 no.
reminded this king of his strength.
Uy. Me va a matar. GG.
Let's take it from the top.
The fire comes for you.
This weakling needs our help.
Get back.
Salió, Grecio.
I have seen enough.
Thank you
Verga.
Essence. This is your doing, I assume. One of our ports has been destroyed.
But his
Chucha madre.
and make use of it. Harness the power of sun and moon. Put an end to this cursed realm.
Let's take it from the top.
Verga. Ay, GG. Hijo de puta.
Get back.
Okay.
Shall reduce you to cinders. By charitable creator.
I could have used you in a double kill. Serve me, disciple.
Oh.
A fort has fallen. Go and break something of theirs.
Mamá verga. Están los.
Push off.
Another chance to prove yourself worthy. Do not squander it.
Now that's entertainment.
Take hold of the
gotta go.
shrines. Earn the Dragon Knight's power.
The enemy is attacking our core. Do something about it. You failed.
Verga.
Defeat. MVP.
Mm-hmm.
Tremble before me.
All right. Get your butts ready for some combat. Allying with such evil is not a test I was expecting.
Try not to die.
Hope you're ready. We got 10 seconds left. 5,
Pero una madera.
1. Let the battle begin.
Verga, pero ¿qué pasó? Fue puta madre. ¡Ay, no!
I must
Ya no voy a tener.
Choose a talent.
We've redesigned our tree glove protectors for combat in the Nexus. Prepare to begin field testing.
Verga.
Impressive.
¡Ay!
Domino online. Take control of it to pilot the maze.
Are against us. Force their hand.
Pucha, ma. Vale, verga. Pero, o sea, no es healer, brother, por poco. Tu madre. Ah. Dios santo.
You did. Yep. Choose a talent.
The field test has started. Attack the enemy protector and see how much damage its armor can take.
Toma.
So that is the extent of the protector's power. Impressive.
Ya.
I must take a short reprieve.
Let's take a short shit. Ya, 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 ya. No. Ese hijo de puta.
An access terminal will be online in a moment.
¿Pero qué me mató? Chetuma.
It's time, hero. Control the terminal and bring in the protector.
Ay, ay, ay. No juega healer, nadie juega healer en esta mierda. ¡Mátala! Madre. Uy, qué bien.
Choose yourself a talent.
Fear is eternal.
Was my favorite fight, you jerks.
Kneel before the Terror Lord. I must pull back for now.
You're about to see the protector's power up close. Be ready for it.
No.
Not the same thing, friend.
everyone, and welcome back to another Warcraft video. So, it has been a pretty darn busy few days. There's lots of stuff on the channel covering Endgame of Shadowlands, Soulbind's lore, of course our interview with Ian. So today what we're going to do is bring together all of the other tidbits. You know, there's just so much that's came out, so we're going to give that to you in a single video. So, yeah, prepare for a big old shot of Shadowlands straight into your veins. Of course, though, the very first thing that you can do right now to get ready for Shadowlands is to read Shadows Rising, which you can get today and listen to today for free with today's sponsor, Audible. Head up the 30-day trial and you'll get to keep Shadows Rising forever. Now, it delves into some really great lore. It sets the stage for Shadowlands with characters like Sylvanas. So, yeah, suffice to say, it's what I'll be listening to in my downtime over the next few days. The early reviews seem pretty darn great too. So, yeah, check it out with that link down below. And with that said, let's get straight into the video. All right, so first up, we've got to talk about how legendaries work. Of course, if you think about Legion, right? Legion legendaries, they were super fun when you had them and a real pain in the ass when you didn't. So, Blizzard have actually went to seemingly great lengths to craft a better legendary system for us. Okay, so recipes. The recipes you actually get for the legendary effects, they come from a variety of sources, seemingly a bit like how essences came from multiple different sources. Now, to some of us, that's maybe a good thing, but to others, it's maybe a bit worrying. Well, what I can say is that we've already discussed having the legendary effects come from fixing sources. So, you know, like the obvious PvE legendaries will come from dungeons and raids. So they seemingly do want to take care to do that better than they did with patch 8.2. And also, from the get-go, they are account-wide. So your legendary recipes are account-wide.
Yeah, account-wide.
And people will like a lot, especially given how the essences went. And really, it does seem like here Blizzard want to get the pros, like the benefits of essences, but to avoid the downsides of their acquisition from 8.2, which I think is pretty nice. So that's the recipes. Then the actual legendary specific materials that you need to like actually craft, or, you know, sort of craft the like effects of the legendaries, they come from Torghast. And the way the actual legendaries work is they're comprised of an effect, which will be the thing that really impacts your character. Then there will be a base item, and then 2 optional reagents that basically you can use to pick your statistics. So yes, you actually get, I mean, man, you get so much more control than you did in Legion. You get to choose, you know, the effect you want, the slot you want-ish. You get to choose your stats as well. That is so much better than Legion. Now, you don't get total control because there are certain powers that only go on, like, certain sort of pieces, right? Like, you know, shoulders or chest or whatever. But still, overall, it seems like this legendary system is miles ahead of Legion, and even if you were a little bit ticked off with it at the start, well, guess what's going to happen? You're going to eventually unlock those things, and they will be unlocked account-wide. That's really cool. And another great thing here is that crafters actually make the base item for the legendaries, and then scribes make the 2 optional reagents that you use to customize your stats. So again, this is something that should hopefully just result in a regular workflow for people who actually enjoy professions. And in my interview with Ian, this is one of the things he said, that really professions, you know, they just had not had a lot of important endgame stuff to do for such a long time, especially in this regard. So it seemed like Ian was pretty excited to actually get the professions sort of going again. So I'm pretty excited about that. Kind of reminds me of just some of the, you know, how professions were in the earliest days of when I played the game. So that's pretty exciting. Okay, next up, we've got Renown. This is a major one. Renown is, you know, it's kind of like the replacement for that AP bar that we've dealt with for 2 expansions. So this is pretty darn important. Now, here's what's key. Renown, which is your, like, renown with your covenant, that is not an open-ended grind. There is actually a weekly cap of renown that you can possibly earn. Now, that is earned from your covenant campaign and just then 2 weekly quests. So basically, this renown is core to most things. It really does matter, right? So it's your legendary recipes, your world quest item quality. I found that really interesting, actually, because, of course, right now in the game, your world quest item quality comes, well, it's based off the currently equipped, or no, sorry, the maximum equipped item level your character has ever had, which kind of could be gamed in some ways, but now it's actually based off sets actually. So that's what we're doing. Then, of course, with there's also cosmetics of all different kinds, and Pathfinder. Yes, Pathfinder is something you're basically just going to get for free if you are just keeping up with weekly content. So that is instead of right now, where it does feel like you've just got this rep grind that you've got to do that can sometimes feel over the top, or maybe, if you just want to fly, you kind of got to do content you never really would have wanted to do otherwise, right? So I think that is potentially a far better system for giving us Pathfinder. Now, in terms of catch-up stuff, well, there is catch-up from day one for alts and Covenant switchers, and this catch-up, according to a Blizzard Blue post, and also Ian was chatting to me, is that you'll basically have the ability to regain any sort of renown that you've missed over the weeks by just, doing regular end-game activities, right? So this basically just means if you take a break, then the way to catch up with renown is just by playing the game the way that you want to, and if you do that, you'll get your renown back. Hey, that'll even get you progress towards Pathfinder.
Máquina
So yeah, that's renown. What it gets you is
4.
cosmetics, legendary recipes, sanctum upgrades, new soul binds, increased world quest gear. Now, there's a lot of people thinking, how mandatory is this? How much work do I have to do? Well, your weekly renown cap, for freeing the souls and getting the anima via those weeklies, that's something that seems to be quite attainable to get. Now, the thing is that past that, you can actually do more world quests, or just whatever, more content to get more souls and more anima. Now, past a certain point, those are they're not going to give you renown anymore, because there's essentially a weekly cap on that renown gain. But instead, those souls and that anima can go into things like your building upgrades, which will help you with cosmetics and stuff. So it seems like Blizzard's goal there is that the actual kind of like mandatory maintenance there is pretty reasonable, but then if you want to go really hard, you can do that. But I think what's really cool here is if you go really hard, it's not going to get you, or at least it seems like it's not going to get you more player power in the same way that just, you daring the diminishing returns of the artifact power, artifact knowledge system sort of would. So it does seem like this is set to be, I'd say, just a more healthy gameplay system. So overall, so far, I would say, so good. And then next up for Torghast, there have been some clarifications. You can run Torghast as much as you want. Blizzard, what they literally said is that they are letting you play the game the way you want. They don't want to put barriers in front of that. So yeah, there's going to be no upfront entrance cost to doing Torghast. You can just go in. Now, of course, the rewards from Torghast will probably be capped. Blizzard were pretty clear. They didn't just want you in there grinding it all the time. But yeah, basically Torghast there, it seems like a lot more reasonable. And, when I think about all of this in the context of what is mandatory for us to do in this expansion, it really does seem like the mandatory stuff is pretty low, right? Like a few dailies, those Covenant weeklies, a run or two of Torghast. It does look like they are kind of going with the idea of you need to do the bare minimum, the bare minimum not being that massive on a character, but that beyond that, there's lots more that you can do, right? Even if it's just for fun or to perhaps, work on some non-essential things, right? Like, your cosmetics. I think that's really good. And I think just a nice thing that really shows what Blizzard are thinking about there is that there's a Covenant daily that can be completed in a dungeon, right? So there's the Maldraxxus one that we found. You could do world quests or whatever in Maldraxxus, or you could just do a Maldraxxus dungeon or two, whatever. But the point there is that'll actually fit how more people, literally want to play the game instead of how they feel they have to play the game. And I think that's really good. And really just this idea of, I think Blizzard helping to facilitate, targeted play, I think will be really nice. So then moving past that, we've got a little bit more information on the Vault, which, basically, it's the new weekly chest. And it really does seem like it is so much more than a weekly chest in the sort of way that we know it from the last two expansions. Here's the quote: "The Vault will grant you a boon that Oribos deems appropriate for your endeavors in aid of the purpose." And the purpose is kind of like the sort of, overall, overriding thing that the sort of denizens of Oribos are working towards. To continue the quote, "It will assess your needs based on which activities you have taken part in that further the purpose." So basically, that is kind of like the in-universe lore justification for this weekly reward chest actually existing. And that's based on the various activities that you do. Now, we know that it's supposed to give us a choice of rewards, so we'll have to wait and see how well that plays out, if there'll be, more in it than just Mythic Plus and PvP weeklies like we've seen so far. And while we are talking on that sort of point, for Mythic Plus, after launch, Blizzard actually said they want to fix up the LFG UI to make dungeon finding a bit better. Right now, it's not super ideal, so I think that is a really good move for them to make. Okay, moving on to another interesting tidbit that really did get headlines, I think for very understandable reasons. There's no bonus XP and heirlooms anymore. Now, they want to add other bonuses to speed up leveling, but just ones that are not experience. So I guess this is when I'll throw it to you. Are there any ideas that you have for what you'd actually want to see from heirlooms there, you know? Now, the obvious ones are maybe movement speed, a looterang effect, a glider, maybe a home teleport, access to supplies, things like
Blend.
that. You know, I do think they should just sort of retain a bit of their niche. Now, that said, the experience not being there, I mean, it's interesting, right? I think overall this kind of shows something good, though, because it does allow Blizzard to actually bring leveling to a good place for all players. And I think that really is something that we're actually seeing from the alpha, and I suppose soon the beta, right? Where people are actually saying that, look, I've leveled a character up on alpha, I didn't have heirlooms, and you know what? It felt good. So from what I understand here, you know, that XP boost and the heirlooms, like, I was there whenever they were first put into the game, right? And Blizzard said, you know, yeah, we've got this problem with leveling up time for your second or third character, so we've invented these heirlooms to solve that problem. Well, now the leveling time is so much shorter that it basically seems like the problem that looms were initially designed to solve, well, that problem is no longer a problem because the entire leveling process has effectively been revamped with this expansion. So I see why that totally got the headlines right, that the XP boost is gone, but I think once you actually get it in your hands, it will make sense. The next, let's move on to another thing. This is small, but there are class animations on the character selection screen. And you know what? This is just a tiny bit of quality of life or polish, I suppose, that is obviously not needed. Technically, it's not important, right? Because it doesn't do anything. But I just think it's a nice little thing that makes the overall experience a bit smoother. And I suppose when we're talking about characters, well, gender changes at the barber. They're now a thing, right? So that's actually an in-game service that will cost gold and not a microtransaction that you've got to go with. And you know what? Whenever I see a microtransaction for something like that being removed, I think that absolutely is a good thing for Blizzard to do. So very nice to see. I mean, hey, less MTX. You know what? I'm kind of happy with that. Now, staying in the theme of customizing your character, well, you know, it's been great, right? We've been seeing so many more things be available for customization, like even the druids, like the druid forms from Legion being like there in your character screen or whatever that we saw a while ago. But another one that they're doing is that artifact appearances might actually be class-wide rather than just spec-wide. And the goal here is basically having players choose what they want and not necessarily what is right, you know, like for their character. And I think this is actually a really good thing. I know that a lot of people will be like, oh, wow, you know, this marksmanship hunter is using the survival, or okay, maybe not survival, the beast mastery hunter weapon. What's going on? It's wrong. But, you know, I think that's a very, oh dear, this is a problem sort of oriented way of looking at things. Whereas at the end of the day, yeah, players got two cool, like, you know, like things, right? Just let them choose the one that they want. I think that, you know, for this game, that makes a lot more sense. And generally, it's something that's in line with this being, I'd say so far, the most cosmetic, customization-focused expansion the game has ever got. Because, like, you've got the, you know, the above changes, the things I just mentioned, but there's also a huge amount of new, you know, character visual things. If you want, like, feathers in your hair, tattoos, scars, stuff like that. And then for the Covenants, I mean, the Covenants also have got a whole bunch of cosmetic items. And Blizzard also said that the Covenant mini-games, which of course we cover in our endgame video, that they will actually be an avenue to more cosmetics. So that likely means, you know, titles, pets, items, mounts, things like that. And it really then does seem to me that this is an expansion about, you know, maybe having your main character that you really care about, but actually keeping 4 characters at max level for all of the unique Covenant gameplay and cosmetics. And I think that's something that seems to be supported by the seemingly very reasonable amount of sort of mandatory, you know, weekly, daily things. It just seems like there could actually be a more pleasant experience here, which is quite nice. Okay, changing gears. So something was said about the Jailer that I thought was interesting. He was described as being, and I quote, Titan++ in terms of his level of power. Suffice to say, there's a lot of speculation to do on that, but, you know, we actually know as well that he's the final boss of this expansion, and that means that we're likely either going through maybe a sort of a slow burn of working through this expansion, right? Maybe we're facing a ton of, like, setbacks as we try to climb Torghast and take on the Maw, but I would say, hopefully, this alleviates some of the issues that BFA had, right? Where BFA didn't have a clear villain from the beginning, and it had this storyline that was kind of all over the place, you know, it was Nazjatar, and it was it was Void, then it was Sylvanas, or was it the Alliance? Who knows? But it seems like this is a bit more like Wrath of the Lich Lich King, where there is a big bad at the end of the expansion, and a lot of the fun is how you get there, how you actually get to where you want to go. And, I think sometimes for storytelling, it can be kind of boring knowing who the big villain is at the end, but I think there are other times where it's very motivating and helps with clarity, and I think in an MMO, it's pretty good set dressing, sort of contextualizes all of your actions, so I think that's pretty cool. Okay, let's move on to just some patch hints and lore stuff. So, yes, there are hints of Shadowlands, the Shadowlands, being invaded by Light, Void, and other forces, and this is supposedly tied into the Maldraxxus sort of defense system. Now, this is something where if you've been paying attention to a particular dungeon in Maldraxxus, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about here, but suffice to say, if you then are thinking about, the future of where the lore is going, I think it's relevant that a being such as the one found in Maldraxxus is actually placed there. So I think that's quite fun. Certainly, Blizzard are still going to be weaving in their various different Cosmic Forces themes. Then also, just a quick one as well, Blizzard actually mentioned they've got plans to add to the Maw after 9.0, so I think that means that, as we try to take the fight to the Jailer, it's not, sure, I'm probably going to get, other places to go to, but it's nice that the Maw is like kind of this base system they've added in now that they actually plan to add more to as time goes on. So there's that. Then hopping back to lore stuff, well, they actually did talk about an expansion of Tyrande and sort of what she's doing, the various Night Warriors, and I guess that also does mean Elune, because in the various different interviews that Blizzard did, they acknowledged that, yeah, Elune is a cosmic deity. She's not just about Azeroth, and there are Night Warriors from other worlds. So I imagine that's something we'll probably see actually be explored. I think that'll be really exciting, because Elune's just been this crazy mystery. So, yeah, that's pretty exciting. They also mentioned just having new places and there being lots of different types of souls that they could sort of look at for new parts of the Shadowlands. And that, of course, instantly got me thinking that, well, with the Machinery of Death breaking after Varian and Vol'jin died, we know that Varian and Vol'jin didn't go to the Maw, right? They probably went to whatever realm of the Shadowlands they should have went to. And it doesn't seem like Varian went to Maldraxxus, which is where you'd think a super sort of just, buff, strong dude like him would go to. So he seemingly went to somewhere else. And I think that could be quite interesting. So maybe, right? Maybe actually in a patch we'll actually get to see where Varian and Vol'jin went. And I think Vol'jin a bit different, but Varian anyway, I think that could be quite interesting. And I suppose that'll really be it. Like, what will be the winding path of patch zones that we go through before we finally meet the Jailer? Because we do know that he is that final boss. Now, sort of, I guess, on a bit of a topic there, Kalia, right? So she was actually somebody who was very interested in going to the Shadowlands. We saw her in the intro on the alpha. Well, it turns out that she's actually not the leader of the Forsaken. Many people thought she was, but no, that's not the case. And Blizz said that she is there for her own personal reasons. Now, if you've been keeping up with that lore and you think about the type of undead that Kalia is, number one, I have to imagine that will interact with the Shadowlands in a very interesting manner. But number two, I have to wonder what she would think about the being that is found in that Maldraxxus dungeon. So I think that is something for us to pay attention to. And then it was also mentioned that Sylvanas will, decently shortly into the expansion's life cycle, actually reveal, basically take the mask off and reveal what she's being motivated by, what her deal is. And I think that'll be interesting because with Sylvanas, a lot of people have just been wondering, what the hell does she want? What is she really doing? What is all of this, ooh, Azeroth's a prison, I'm going to set you all free. What does she actually mean? Well, it seems like we might actually find out soon. Could be quite exciting. Now, continuing on with the lore, we were also said that, not to spoil anything, but there's a high chance that Arthas was sent to the Maw. Now, of course, the Maw is somewhere where everyone went to, got sucked into after the Machinery of Death was broken. But before that, the Maw is like only where the nastiest, the worst, the most irredeemable of characters would go to. So if we know that Arthas was sent to the Maw, it does make you think that, hey, at some point we'll probably see Arthas. But that said, I do want to set your expectations and let you know that Blizzard is self-aware here. They have way previously said that, they view Arthas as being this very sacred, important character to the Warcraft universe, and they don't want to use him lightly. So if Arthas does actually make an appearance, I imagine it'll be in a very planned way, where it really does matter instead of just being like, in case of emergency, break the glass, here's Arthas, now everyone is subscribed. I don't think and then, a little bit more lore, the Arbiter is actually part of the Pantheon of Death. Now, this is something that I wasn't quite sure if she was, based on what Ian had said in my interview, but no, she is apparently a part of this Pantheon of Death, and the purpose of the Pantheon of Death is to sort of grease the wheels of the machinery of death. That machinery seems to be upholding the purpose. And we were also sort of told that the first ones are kind of like on a Titan-ish level, and that they were a part of just sort of setting up the whole Shadowland system. Now, what I find very interesting is you take that information and then combine that with it being said that the Jailer is Titan++. And I'll tell you what, this actually has me thinking back to a video we did previously where, you know, right, I was sort of thinking, right, in sort of like Greek mythology, you've did ++ land system. Now, what I find very interesting is if you take that information and then combine that with it being said that the Jailer is Titan++. And I'll tell you what, this actually has me thinking back to a video we did previously where, you know, right, I was sort of thinking, right, in sort of like Greek mythology, you've got the Olympians, and then before the Olympians, which, you know, is like Zeus and the boys, you know, many others, of course, but, you know, that group. Before them, you have the Titans. But before the Titans, you've got Gaia and Uranus. So there's a bit of me that's wondering that if the first ones are on a Titan-ish level, is it actually the case that the Jailer is more like Gaia and Uranus, some sort of super fundamental, super old being? I mean, hey, if the Jailer is Titan++, I mean, surely it can't just be, you know, like Amun-Thul sort of betrayed his brother and bound him up in the Shadowlands. Surely he's got to be more than that. Or hey, Titan++, maybe that's a programming language. How exciting. But there you go. That is a whole bunch more details. We've just collated a bunch of them about this expansion and how it's actually going to work. And you know, it's funny. It really is funny because going through this video, to me, almost everything is positive. It makes me feel good, right? Especially going through legendaries. Man, I remember being a bit salty about legendaries back in Legion, even though I thought their effects were really fun. Everything so far to me seems really good, bar the sticklers, right? And you know what those are. Those are the conduits. Those are the Covenant abilities, you know? A, they're not really that great because they're class-based, and B, you know, maybe there's a Covenant you love, but it doesn't have an ability that you like for your spec, you know? It's so weird because with this expansion, just going through like the big sort of detailed dump we did today, just collating all the stuff that sort of went on, so much of it's so positive. I hear about how Blizzard's handling Renown, right? Where it seems like you can actually just go do your basic stuff and just feel comfortable for the rest of the week. It sounds so good to me. And then there is just those two sticklers. So suffice to say, they will be the ones to watch. And when I think about the community perception out there, it really does seem like, bar those two things and miscellaneous class issues, so druids, shadow priests, I'm sorry, yeah, it's a bit rough. But it really seems like, bar that, just about everything is being done right and in a way better direction than BFA. So yeah, it just is interesting, you know, can Blizzard get the conduits and the Covenant class abilities? Can they actually get those things right, such that the vast majority of good things that they're doing actually sort of do manage to shine? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But anyway, that's it for today's video. Of course, if you want to support the channel and also get yourself ready for the storyline of this expansion, you can get and listen to Shadows Rising right now. It comes out on the 14th of July. I believe this video is going up on the 14th of July, so you can do that with today's sponsor, Audible. Links down below, and from what I hear, it is a really great read/listen. So you can check that out. Thank you very much for supporting the channel, and with that, I will see you next time. Cool. Well, I'm going to get us warmed up with some very small-scale lore. So, recently, right, we hopped on the alpha and we saw a whole bunch of people mention the first one. So, the question is, it seems the first ones might have made the Shadowlands, or at least a very big bunch of dudes. So, where do you think they might fit into that cosmology chart that you guys have been teasing us with for so very long?
That's a very good question. I mean, who made the Titans? the Titans there to begin with? Who created all of what we're seeing? What is the hierarchy of power in the Warcraft universe? I think.
Hello, everyone. Madeline Rue was kind enough to take some time out of her day to actually sit down with me and talk about Shadows Rising. A lovely lore interview, something we've never done on the channel before.
Ay,
Now, a
no
little
me
heads up
jodas.
before we begin. We are going to be talking about Shadows Rising. So if you're ready of the mindset
Ay,
of I'm going to pick up this book, then do know that we are going to dive into a couple of sections of the book itself. So there are going to be some spoilers. But for those that are like, do I want this book? Or for those that have read it and want some clarification, there's some good stuff here. It was an absolute pleasure to interview Madeline Rue. I would highly recommend to go follow her on Twitter because the tweets that come out of there, delicious. All the socials are down below the video. And yeah, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to something very unique on this channel. We're actually doing a lore interview. Lucky enough to have Madeline Rue with us, author of the latest novel, Shadows Rising. Madeline, thank you very much for joining us here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. This is exciting.
Did that sound efficient enough? Like I'm trying to flow into it?
Yeah, no, you got it. You nailed it. You nailed it.
Cool. For those that follow me on Twitter, I've actually asked around, like, send in your questions, tell me what you want to know. And I honestly expected that a whole lot of people wanted to know more about the details of the book, right? Our lore lovers, like, what is going on? But no, it turns out that they're actually very interested in you. So, to kick us off, to begin with, you were born, you grew up, you got an interest into story writing. How did it all came to be? How did you become the author of Shadows Rising?
Oh my gosh. I've always been interested in writing. It's kind of been my hobby ever since I was like literally a child. I mean, I have books I wrote when I was 6, 7 years old, all fully illustrated, things like that. So I think it was predestined from a, a pretty early time, but I didn't really consider that a viable option. I don't know. I just thought like, oh, I'll always be writing. Maybe I'll try to get published one day, but I didn't think it was something you could just do as a job. Like I think a lot of people have this perception that it's, almost like trying to get famous or something, but it's actually like not that difficult. I mean, it's hard. It is hard, but I think there's like a route that you can take, and you probably will get there eventually. So, yeah. So I had a pretty like average childhood. I grew up in the Midwest here, which is Minnesota, and went to university in Wisconsin. And I went for archaeology and Egyptology, and then I switched to writing because I was no good at science, turns out.
Hang
And,
on. I was blown away by a fully illustrated novel at age 7, but archaeology, how did that happen?
I just really wanted to be like out in the desert, learning things, discovering things. And yeah, I guess my perception was that it would be more of like a history degree kind of, but it is actually very scientific and incredibly complicated and difficult. And yeah, so I started taking classes. I think a big part of it too was the professor that I was learning under was awful and very, very boring. So yeah, I just sort of fell out of it. But I thought, well, this writing thing, everybody tells me I'm good at this, and I still do it for fun. And, maybe I should just switch my degree and pursue that. So yeah, so I did. And
So you could have been
it's a lot of
Indiana
reading.
Jones. So you could have been Indiana Jones, and
Yeah.
instead you decided to go this path.
Yeah. Well, fun fact, the guy that Indiana Jones was based off of went to my university. He was yeah, Graham Chapman Andrews. He was handsome. He was more like, I think he did more like dinosaur stuff, but he also dabbled in, ancient civilizations. But yeah, he was the inspiration for Indiana Jones, and so there's like pictures of him everywhere, and stuff named after him and whatever. So
Small
yeah,
world.
so I picked that, and my school was known for anthropology, archaeology, that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I just sort of switched focus, put all my energy into writing. I was sort of more going into a script writing focus at first. I was like, oh, I'll write, for TV and movies and stuff like that. And I think I mean, it was okay, but it just wasn't, just didn't, it wasn't what I wanted to do in the end. So yeah, I just refocused, did a lot of short stories at first. That was sort of my entry point. I got a short story published before I graduated university, and then as I was doing my final semester, that was sort of when I got my agent, and then my first book was published like 2 years out of university. So
Wow.
yeah, it was all pretty fast. Like I was working at a bookstore when it was all happening, and I feel like I'm like I've never had like a real job. Like I've never had to go to work in a, you know, in an office and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was really fast, and I've been just doing publishing ever since. It's just been my career. So
And did you also write for a personal blog on the internet, which was then turned into a book? Did my research?
yeah, that was yeah, that was how I was discovered initially. I guess you would say. My agent's brother found this like horror survival blog that I was publishing, kind of as a book, but also a blog, and he passed it on to her. And then she reached out, and we just, you know, we connected right away. And obviously, I did my research; like she's, a, you know, a legitimate agent and all that stuff. And I was kind of already in the process of researching that and submitting my book, a different book that I'd written, to agents. So I was familiar with the process, and I actually knew of her when she
Okay.
reached out. So I was like, "Whoa, this is crazy." Yeah, so we've been together ever since. She's still my agent, 10 years on almost. So yeah, it was cool. I mean, it
Insane.
was like very weird way to get published. I don't recommend it to people. I recommend they do things the traditional way. You'll have much better luck probably. So, yeah.
So that background is where like the horror section comes from, because when you write your stories, for example, in Traveler Part 3 or in Shadows Rising, you can tell that you do not shy away from the darker stuff. But there's also a lot of romance and relationships. Where does that background come from?
It's funny. I kind of stumbled into doing horror first. The other book that I was sending around is a historical romance novel. It never got published, and it won't. It's terrible. But yeah, I that was sort of my first love, and I'm actually now kind of pivoting back towards that. So, you know, I have a few horror books that I'm still working on, but ultimately, I think I'm starting to sort of like track back towards historical romance, because that was my first love, and something I've always still kind of just done for fun on the side. But yeah, so, and it's hard because once you get one book published in one genre, the pressure is to stay there and to
Mm.
build a brand and to really be known for some, you know, like Stephen King kind of writes the same book over and over and over again. I mean, he's great. Like that's why they're that's why they're as good as they are. But yeah, I can't do that. I can't stay in one place forever. I feel like I've kind of been like, okay, I think I'm closing this chapter of my career, and I'd like to focus on some other stuff for a while. So yeah, but brand wise, it's a terrible idea. You're supposed to just, you know, be
Just
very
stay in your
consistent,
corner.
be known. Yeah, just be known for one thing, and keep doing that over and over again. So
It's difficult. Like if you're on lore, YouTube videos that do on lore, and you're trying to expand, it's really difficult to get that audience going. But okay,
hmm
you definitely succeeded, because the moment in verse short story that you've written have been incredibly well received. Like so many people loved it.
yeah,
Laura from our voice acting it. It was just beautifully done.
that was a highlight of my life for sure.
That's sweet. I was like, beautiful. But
Yeah, it's
then
really good.
Blizzard approaches you and they're like, we like your stuff. Go write us a book. How does that work?
Well, with Traveler, which was my sort of first job with them, I found out through just connections that they were looking for someone to finish out the series. They needed someone to come in and do book three. And I was like, well, you know, I'm a huge WoW player. Like, I'd love to do, you know, and sometimes it's just a matter of that. It's just like throwing your hat in the ring and saying you want to do something and you're available, and being, you know, willing to take on the time constraint and, you know, agree to the money that they're offering and all that kind of good stuff. But I basically auditioned. You know, I knew there were other authors. I didn't know who, but I knew there were other authors like in the running. And then yeah, I just basically had to write a sample chapter, prove that I, you know, really knew my stuff, prove that I loved the game. I mean, I was sending them pictures of like, look at my World of Warcraft tattoo. Look at this. Look at like, here's me doing this. Here's this. You know, here's a cosplay, whatever. So anything and everything to just like prove that I was really hungry for it.
Pues
So
putas de Blizzard
yeah,
son
so then I got that job. And it's funny because the sample
buitres.
chapter I did is
Capaz le
almost
ofrecieron
exactly
basura de dinero
as it was in the
por la
audition.
afición
It's
de
like,
WoW que tenía
I
en
mean,
la
there
mano.
were some adjustments, obviously, but
And which
yeah,
chapter was it?
it's pretty close. It's just the opening. I think it's chapter. Maybe I don't remember if there's a prologue in that one, but it's like chapter
Ay,
one,
qué
like when
verga.
everything kicks off. That was basically what I submitted as a proof of concept, and yeah, so that was really, and it was just there's a chemistry with every team that you work with for a book, and so we got along really well.
También
It was
tengo
a
un
really
reboot,
smooth process.
Digo,
I found them a lot of fun. I think they liked me. So
claro.
we just kind of vibed, and then I'm sure there were internal discussions happening. I honestly don't know like the lore of how I ultimately got to write Shadows Rising, but I think it helped that I had done the Traveler book, and they were like, okay, this is we like this
Yeah.
direction, we like her pacing or whatever, we want to like stick with this style. So yeah, so then I just I think it was last April I got the email. I was like, hey, do you want to do Shadows
Oye, ya
Rising?
te la
Or
prendo.
I didn't have a title then, but Untitled Shadowlands prequel novel, and I said yes.
So a year ago you got the email. No, before I ask anything else, you mentioned a WoW tattoo. What exactly do you have?
Well, it's like on my leg, so I can't really show it.
Oh, no,
but
no,
it's scenario. It's I posted it on Twitter. I could post it again, but it's Cenarius with Brightwing and the Scythe of a Loon. So it's kind of my love letter to druids, to the Legion Druid Hall kind of stuff. Yeah.
Sick. Right. So they come to you, and you got the email like a year ago, which means that you don't have a whole lot of time to actually work on these books and get your framing in. Like, do they send you a list of this is what we want in the book, and then you work around it?
It's really more of an outline you're handed. It's pretty specific stuff. You're not given a ton of, latitude, especially with certain character beats. Like, we were talking before we started recording, where it's like certain characters have a long arc that I'm not even, I don't even know where they're going, right? So, but I'm told like, we need you to start setting something up. So I think, I've seen some feedback of like, well, this person would never do that. Why did you make them do this? And it's like, hang in there. Like, this is step one of like a lot, or this is actually, I think I'm picking it up on step 12, right? Of whatever their long-term arc is going to be. So yeah, so people do start to make, more difficult decisions or sort of shift or whatever. But yeah, all that stuff is predetermined because they have the vision. I don't even know, what happens in Shadowlands for the most part. So
Okay, no spoilers.
I'm coming
got it.
in. Right. Well, I honestly, I wish I would love to know. But yeah, no. So I'm just literally handed like, this is exactly what we need you to do. This is exactly the information we can let you have. Uh, cool. Like, now you kind of take the outline, and I sort of put my own spin on some things and made some suggestions here and there, like, hey, what if we tried this? Does this sound right? That kind of thing. So at the end of the day, it's all they signed off on all of it. It's not like, I was handed the keys to the kingdom and just got
Yeah,
to
of
do
course.
whatever the hell I wanted. That's not how it works at all. So yeah, so it's very directed, and that's a part of this job, is you have to be willing to kind of set that aside, set your ego aside, and just say, okay, yeah, if this is what you need me to do, I'll do it. So yeah, it's very directed. There's definitely places where they allow for pushback or conversations or whatever. And there's definitely things in there that are mine. Like, that's just the way it's going to be. But
Is it
yeah,
Thrall's
it's very.
Was it Thrall's apps that was like your section there?
I really kept it together. I didn't. I didn't even. I don't think it's obvious in the book how much I love Thrall. At least I hope not. I don't want that personal bias to creep in. I think I kept it pretty chill. I didn't like. But there's no rippling muscle sections, I don't think.
Would have been great though. Like,
but
Jaina touched his rippling muscles, and they said like, "We're different."
I know, and he thinks about that moment. I could have had him be like, "God, my arms looked great that day." Yeah, he's
Would have
like,
been
I
great.
really like worked out right before so that I would like, look great in the cutscene. Yeah, no. So it's really specific. It's yeah, it's really specific. Obviously, when I turned in my draft, I sort of, on my first go through, I sort of like, I took some swings. I tried to like take a few risks, kind of push them on a few things, and then they sort of were like, like let's let's rein this in a little bit,
So was there
or we like this, punch this up, whatever, that kind of stuff.
so was there actually something that you wrote that you couldn't get into the book? Like, what were there actually sections like this is just not going to happen?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm always going to push for like let's really like develop these characters. Let's really have them change a lot. And I think people are allergic to to that a lot of times. They really want their characters to just be the same all the time, especially if they're like a quote unquote good guy. They don't want them to ever like get a whiff
Mm.
of stink on them or whatever. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely stuff where I was like, what if Anduin got a tattoo? And, and they're
Oh
like,
my.
no. It's like,
Oh,
dang it.
come on. Like a
I
golden
know.
lion on his shoulder? That would
Right.
look
I was like, what if he
great.
gets a big old lion, just like chest piece? Wouldn't that be dope? And they were like, yeah, that would be dope. You can't do that. I was like, okay.
You're
So,
so going
just
through
I was just
puberty.
trying. Right. I mean, he's 18. So, the are we spoiler chatting about the
I
book?
imagine anything is spoiler chatting, and otherwise I'll put up for the viewers. I'll put up a little
Okay.
icon if we're
Okay.
talking spoilers.
Okay. Cool. Because I was gonna say, like, the Jarek chapter is the compromise, right? Where we're seeing kind of like the weight of everything he's experienced and how he sort of has to like process that and what he does to sort of like, have a little bit of time to himself and stuff like that. So, yeah. So that like, I would kind of push the idea to the furthest possible corner, and they would say like, actually, we like parts of this. Let's like, let's talk. Let's compromise. So.
Okay, cool. So that scene really came from you because I've seen so many people happy about it. Like, it doesn't add a massive amount, like, it's not an epic battle, but it adds so much depth to
Yeah.
Anduin's character, and it breathes so much life into a world where just sitting and trying to breathe it in, and then Jaina catches him. Oh, damn, was good.
Yeah, as soon as I thought of it, I was just like, well, she's got to bust him, and I think it's nice because it also adds a lot of depth to their interactions and sort of her being like, I get it, I've been there, like your secret's safe with me, even though they kind of butt heads a tiny bit in the book. I think that was a nice moment for them to sort of come back to a place of understanding and that she really gets what he's going through. So yeah, I mean, I like that chapter. I stand behind it, but yeah,
Ah,
I
te
think it's
la
just nice to see
verga.
and to see him sort of like out among his
Yeah.
people, and in a place like the Elwyn pub that I think is like everyone's been there,
Escucha.
like it's kind of this like staple of the world, and I have such a fondness for it, and yeah, I just thought it would be a nice way to just sort of be like, what does he really do when he has like 6 hours where he's not needed?
Mm.
I mean, yeah, he doesn't have any friends his own age, which is weird and would
Sí.
make
Ah,
probably give you a lot of problems in your
He's
life.
always been
So
older, hanging out with the big boys. But with Anduin,
yeah, but
like,
that's weird, man. Like you got to have
mm,
friends. You have to have peers. You need to be able to like talk to someone and blow off steam and be like, who does he talk about like crushes with? You know what I mean? Like how
mm,
how is he ever going to say like,
Raffion,
hey, I like
a
I
6-year-old
don't know
dragon.
anything about anything.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about internal talks about that. I don't know anything, so don't ask.
We all
But
know.
yes, but for example, whoever he's, even if it's just any, if someone passing by, he's
Mm.
like, oh, look at that. Like you can't do that if you're him. So to me, I just thought at a certain point it would
o sea, que tengo
break
que
you.
leer estas huevadas.
Um,
So as we're
Ah,
talking
la
about
verga.
Anduin anyways, and we're talking like deep dive into spoilers, because we are familiar with who you are, and we're very lucky to actually have you writing for the Warcraft universe
Mira.
because delicious.
Ay,
On Anduin, in the book, he's facing a lot of pressure. And
mhm.
he, in the past, was very much the moral compass to Varian. As his father was leading, he tried to push him towards the right path. And now we see that when he's in the reins, he's dealing with pressure himself. We see a similar storyline with Talungi and her father, another child
Yep.
that tried to convince her. Those parallels are intentional, like we're not reading too deep into it.
No, absolutely. I thought about the two of them as, real mirrors for each other in this book. I thought it was actually great that we got to have them
Good.
both be features of this book.
Ah,
I would love to get them together in a room one day. I think they'd have a lot to talk about. But yeah, no, it's absolutely intentional. It's to say, okay, this is how one person's dealing with it. This is how another person's dealing with it. They both have very similar traumas in terms of losing their father at a young age in a really like horrible public way, you know, that everybody knows about. Like that sort of private grief has sort of been taken from them because it's like the world's loss. It's not just their loss. And also then immediately being thrust into a position of leadership,
Yeah.
and but maybe perhaps before they're ready, and all the pressures that come with that, and sort of being these people who are, you know, young and trying their best, but at the end of the day, like there are all these other people around them who are older and potentially wiser, and that's a lot of pressure to be like, wow, there's like I have to stand toe to toe with these people who are, you know, in Anduin's case, some of these people are thousands of years old, and how do you handle that, right? Like
Mm.
who is he to kind of like tell the night elves what to do, you know, like how do you even process that? So yeah, it's absolutely intentional that they are kind of there to be, say, two sides of a similar coin.
I mean, to be fair, who was his father to tell Tyrande like hush and patience? Like, come on, dude, you're a human. This is a 10,000-year-old elf warrior maiden.
Yeah.
But that's neither
Yeah,
here
and
nor
I hope
there.
that comes through too. I really did want to make sure I got Tyrande right. I'm a big fan of hers, and I also just was like, took a lot of time to think about just how absolutely enraged she is by this point, and just the frustration and the sadness and all that. So yeah, but exactly, it's like they're both kind of dealing with similar things on
Mm.
different sides of the world, and um yeah, I think it's cool. It's special that they get to be in a book together and serve as that function as sort of foils for one another.
Okay, cool that we read that right. So the pressure on
Yeah.
Anduin, eventually it's, you know, a scene where it boils up and then a certain thing happens to him. And people were wondering, or myself were wondering as well, like the intention behind that scene. Like, was it Void? Was it Jailer? Can you explain a little bit more about it?
Oh, we're talking about the very end.
Yeah.
Yeah, the very okay. So again, I was given limited information on this. This was explicitly told that I had to do this, so there's clearly plans there. But yeah, you know, there's some sort of dark energy that he is reaching for in that moment of rage and frustration and sadness. So yeah, I don't know a ton. It was like he needs to, you know, during this confrontation there needs to be a surge of dark power that comes from him, and the people around him that care for him need to be taken aback by it. So
Okay, so
that's
definitely a
that's
beat.
about all I know about that.
Well, we do have Syrah,
That I can say.
who then tells him like, "You will serve as well. You will serve as well." Like falling line, which was a nice line. Have you ever heard of the Whispers of Il'gynoth by chance?
I have, yes.
Is there something there? Maybe.
Again,
Hijo de
like we're getting into
hueva.
stuff that is dangerous.
Dangerous territory. We're gonna veer away. Dangerous territory. Let's not even go there. Let us take it.
I mean, I will say, all I'll say is like that scene specifically is everything is extremely intentional. So it's, you know, and
So
I said
epic.
this to Pyro, I think, where it was like, I think there are moments in this book where it's clear that there's like a signal coming
Mm.
from us or from Blizzard being like, this is not a mistake. This, you know, like we're saying this, you know, deliberately. This is like, you know, a flag or something kind of. And I would say that's one of those moments of like, yeah, obviously that's like a setup for something that's coming.
Cool. One last question about Anduin. There was another blonde light wielder that really desperately wanted to claim vengeance or justice in his mind. The parallels to Arthas' story, were they intentional or is it just more like it happened?
Um, I think on my part it was intentional. I think it's impossible to miss that there's a lot of similarities between them. I think I think it comes through perhaps the strongest in the scene with him and Jaina in the map room where she's sort of like seeing that, right? Like I think
Yeah.
she's like, uh-oh, like I've seen this before, and she's older and has learned a lot and has been down that road. So I think yes, I don't think that's like a bad read or
Mm.
anything. I know it was in my head when I was writing about it. I was thinking about that. And you know, I think internally people are like, yeah, I think this is good, you know, like this is cool, this is like this functions really well with this sort of callback to Arthas, and especially that it's in a scene with Jaina there. I think it's like very powerful. But yeah, no, I don't think that's an incorrect read. I wouldn't say that then that's like, yes, like Anduin is Arthas reborn confirmed or any junk like that. Like that's not what I'm saying. But I think yes, it is an intentional callback to him.
There was speculation a while ago where somebody speculated
Jue,
about
¿te
Anduin being
imaginas
the
que
son of Arthas
Anduin de
instead
la
of
nada
Varian?
se vuelve
It
algo
gave me
como el
such a
Lich
headache. Like, yes, they have blonde
Puta,
hair, and yes, they are light wielders, but
fue increíble.
similarities does not mean one and
No
the same.
necesariamente
Especially
Lich
since we're
King,
going
pero
Shadowlands, which a lot of Wrath the Lich King references. It's cool to see
un
that Anduin is
artefacto que lo
galloping
vuelva
around
malo.
through Westfall on a similar path, but then will it be a similar path, or will he actually keep his eyes open and ears open to those around him that try to carry that weight with him, And
Yeah.
that's the cool part to see.
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the biggest themes in this book are sort of those ripples that happen where someone else's decision or someone else's choice or someone else's mistake can influence your life so much, and then it becomes your problem, right? And it
Yeah.
becomes your like, okay, well, am I going to let this make me do bad things? Am I going to let this sort of influence me in a negative way, or am I going to take control of the situation and have a different outcome, right? So I think, I still think there's tons of room there for Anduin to. I think a lot of people see like, oh, he used something dark, or he swore, now he's like a villain. It's like I think that's such a mistake, right? Because
Yeah.
I didn't write anyone in this book as a villain. Even Apari, who I got to make up, I'm like, she's not a villain. None of these people are. It's not interesting to write a character that way. And if they're just this sort of trope, if they're just an archetype, it's not interesting. And so I think there's a lot of room for Illyria and Trellian. I think there's a lot of room for interpretation of how they behave. Same with Anduin. There's a lot of room for him to, go one way or the other or stay somewhere in the middle. So.
And that's the fun part of the book. It actually sets up events for the Shadowlands, what they could develop further. Not so much a need-to-know basis, like it's not a stepping through the Dark Portal and where did this expansion come from. But once you go through
Right.
the game, you understand where the mind is at, you understand where the emotions are at, and that's so good to see.
Yeah, that was my hope, right? Is to sort of get everyone in the correct emotional place and perhaps physical place to uh before this expansion, so that when you go into it, you're like, this is sort of circulating in your mind. But again, like, I know one of the questions you got, I'll answer it right now. Why is this book filler? Well, if one man's filler is another man's treasure. But like, if you I think that's a mistake. I think maybe you're not reading closely enough if you think that there aren't things in this book that are absolutely going to come back and that are important and that are setups for further things. And also, there's constant feedback that the book shouldn't even exist, right? Like nothing should happen that doesn't happen in the game. And so I think this is sort of trying to find that happy middle of like, cool stuff happens. If you're a lore head, this book is going to make you happy. There's stuff in here for you. If you're not and you just want explosions and character deaths and constant action, like, no, we're not going to do that, because in the past, people have been very upset that you can't understand the expansion if you don't read the precursor novel. So
Yeah.
this is trying to shoot the middle on that and sort of be like, there's a lot of fun stuff here, a lot of interesting stuff, a lot of hints at what's to come, a lot of foreshadowing, but not here's this massive event. If you don't know about it, you're completely confused
Exactly.
by Shadowlands.
Like it's supports
yeah, so that was
instead
sort
of
of the
explains.
intent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. It's supplementary material, which I kind of agree is what a tie-in novel should be. It's there if you want more, and if you don't want more, then don't read it.
Speaking of tie-ins and weaving, by the way, you did such a fantastic job with getting all these different sources and storylines, like from a moment in verse to Dark Mirror to the freaking cheese connections and classic. Where did that come from? Like, do you have a board in your room with like little notes of this is all that's gonna, like, how did you establish that? It was mind-blowing to see those connections.
I think it's just 20 years of osmosis of this game just existing in my life, of just what feels right, like what feels natural right now. What do I pay attention to when I'm in the game world? What would come up? What wouldn't? Yeah, I don't know. And obviously, like, I have to stress, like, I was doing a lot of research. It's not like I just knew all this stuff, right? Like, they handed me character dossiers and things like that, and then I use like lore videos. I'm like, I use your stuff. I use Pyro stuff. I use I was looking through all of YouTube I loved, like, there are people who do like, here's the entire character arc of so and so in one video, right? And if you're like working on that person that day, you're like, this is great. This is going to get me so much information. It's going to get me in the right headspace. It's going to remind me of events that, like, hey, if that seems relevant, let me like bring that up, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just like it's a mixture, right, of in the moment research. Obviously too, there are stuff
Ya
where
terminé todo.
like, I'm trying to think. Oh, so like in Nordrassil, when Thrall's there and he's talking to the night elves, like I completely forgot that he saw them get married there. Like I forgot. And so the WoW team was like, hey, that might be a cool thing to like bring up, right? Like it's it's logical that he would have that thought, like, wow, look at us now, this is so crazy, right? Like,
Yeah.
look at how far we've come, look at how far we've fallen apart, that kind of thing. So yeah, so there's stuff like that too, where they're sort of like, oh, hey, like this seems right to sort of bring up. So yeah, it's a mixture of those things. And for me, like, yeah, I was fresh off of being in classic. So when you're working with Matthias Shaw, I feel like he's one of those people you encounter right out of the gate, right?
The
Like
Defiance
he's
Brotherhood.
so early. Yeah, he's so early on and he's such a big part of your gaming experience. So yeah, it just felt like natural to sort of call back to that stuff. And you also forget how condensed the timeline is in this game. Like, Thrall's like mid 30s and
He
all
was
this stuff
15
has
when he
happened
did
to
like
him.
the whole horde thing. Like an expansion takes a year. Like, are you kidding me? There's so much that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, so to me, it's like it actually doesn't seem weird to make a callback to something that happened 15 years ago when you're like, well, it only actually did physically happen like 15
Yeah.
years ago. And I think about stuff that happened to me then all the time.